The emergency beacon cut through the cosmic silence like a blade through silk. Ambassador Valen felt his crystalline body vibrate with the alien frequency as his ship's sensors locked onto the distress signal. 3 solar cycles had passed since. The Threnody joined the Galactic Council, and this was their first rescue mission in the Outer Rim territories. Unknown vessel broadcasting on primitive frequencies, his navigation officer reported, her voice creating musical chimes in their shared atmospheric chamber. Energy signatures suggest severe damage. Life signs are unusual. Valen extended his consciousness through the ship's bio-neural network, feeling the data flow through his crystalline matrix. The readings made no sense. Whatever species was broadcasting the distress call should have been dead hours ago, based on the damage patterns his sensors detected. "Deploy the rescue formation," Valen commanded. "Approach with caution. Unknown species may react unpredictably to contact." The Threnody rescue fleet consisted of 3 vessels, each grown rather than built, their living hulls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns. They had saved dozens of species over the millennia, always arriving to find desperate survivors clinging to failing life support systems. The galaxy was full of fragile beings who needed careful handling during rescue operations. As they approached the coordinates, Valen's sensors painted a picture that defied his understanding. The damaged vessel was massive by primitive standards, its hull scarred and torn in ways that should have resulted in explosive decompression. Yet somehow it maintained structural integrity. More puzzling still, the life signs inside weren't fading. They were stable, active, and moving with purpose. "Hail them!" Valen ordered. The communication channel crackled to life, and an alien voice filled the bridge with sounds unlike anything in Valen's experience. The words were harsh, clipped, and carried an underlying tone that made his crystalline form resonate with unease. "This is Captain Roy of the merchant vessel Endurance. Thanks for responding to our beacon. We've had a bit of a rough time with pirates, but we're managing fine. You folks offering assistance?" Valen paused, his translator struggling with the alien concepts. "Managing fine?" The sensor readings showed catastrophic damage to multiple hull sections, several fires burning in the lower decks, and what appeared to be severe trauma to many of the crew members. "Captain Roy, this is Ambassador Valen of the Threnody Rescue Service. Our sensors indicate your vessel has suffered critical damage. Please prepare for emergency evacuation procedures." A sound emerged from the communication system that Valen's translator couldn't interpret. His xenology officer later explained it was called laughter. "Appreciate the offer, Ambassador, but we've got this under control. Though if you've got any spare hull plating or power conduits, we could use them for repairs. Fair warning, though, you might want to wear protective gear if you come aboard. Our atmosphere's a bit thick for most species." Valen exchanged confused harmonics with his crew. No species referred to critical life support failure as merely thick atmosphere. Against standard protocol, he decided to board the alien vessel personally. The airlock transition was the first shock. The atmospheric mixture that greeted him would have been lethal to most galactic species. A dense soup of reactive gases that corroded his protective barriers on contact. Yet the aliens breathed it naturally, seemingly thriving in what was essentially a controlled, toxic environment. Captain Roy met him at the airlock, and Valen experienced his second shock. The alien was bipedal, but built like a siege engine. Dense muscle covered a frame that suggested evolution in high-gravity conditions. Scars marked the creature's hide, evidence of violence that should have been fatal. Most disturbing were the eyes, predatory orbs that tracked movement with the focused intensity of an apex hunter. "Welcome aboard the Endurance," Roy said, extending an appendage that Valen realized was meant as a gesture of greeting. The captain's grip could have crushed most crystalline beings, yet was carefully controlled. "Sorry about the mess. Pirates hit us about 6 hours ago." As they moved through the ship's corridors, Valen witnessed scenes that challenged everything he knew about physics and biology. Crew members worked calmly in areas where his sensors detected radiation levels that should have been immediately fatal. A female called Beth was performing surgical procedures on herself, explaining to a fascinated junior officer how human cardiovascular systems operated with redundant pathways. Backup hearts, she explained while suturing a wound that would have killed any council species. Evolution gave us spares for most vital systems. Pretty standard deathworld adaptation. Deathworld. The term made Valen's form resonate with harmonic distress. In galactic classification, deathworlds were planets so hostile that they were deemed uninhabitable. No known species had evolved on such worlds and survived to develop spaceflight capabilities. Roy led him to the engine compartment where crew members had somehow restored function to systems that should have been irreparable. They worked with tools that were clearly improvised from salvaged materials, yet their repairs exceeded Galactic Council engineering standards. "Your species," Valen managed, his voice creating discordant chimes. "You evolved on a death world?" Roy nodded, seemingly unbothered by the concept that terrified most galactic citizens. "Earth's a tough neighborhood. Everything there tries to kill you, one way or another. Weather, wildlife, plants. Even the ground itself likes to shake apart, from time to time. You learn to adapt or you die. But your technology, your peaceful demeanor." "Oh, we're peaceful enough," Roy replied, and Valen caught something predatory in that smile. "Had to learn to be. When everyone on your planet is a potential threat, you either figure out cooperation or you go extinct. We chose cooperation." Younger crew member approached, carrying a report tablet. "Captain, we've restored hull integrity to sections 4 through 7. Engineering says we'll have full power in another 2 hours. Roy accepted the report with casual confidence. "Good work, Tim. Tell the crew we'll be ready to depart once our guests finish their inspection." Valen realized with growing unease that the humans hadn't needed rescue at all. They had broadcast the distress beacon as a courtesy, a way to prevent other ships from worrying about their condition. In 6 hours, they had accomplished repairs that would have taken a Galactic Council engineering team days to complete, assuming they could work in such hostile conditions at all. "Captain Roy," Valen said carefully, "what happened to the pirates? Who attacked you?" The predatory gleam returned to the human's eyes. "They won't be bothering anyone else. We try to avoid violence when possible, but sometimes peaceful solutions aren't an option." As Valen prepared to return to his ship, he understood that first contact protocols would need complete revision. The Galactic Council hadn't encountered a new member species. They had discovered apex predators who had somehow learned to build starships. The implications sent harmonic warnings through his crystalline matrix as he transmitted his initial report to the Council. Humanity had arrived in the galaxy, and nothing would ever be the same. The data streams flowed like liquid light through Prime Researcher Kell's neural interfaces, each piece of information more disturbing than the last. 3 weeks had passed since Ambassador Valen's first contact report, and the Galactic Council's Xenobiology Department had been working around the clock to understand these humans. What they discovered challenged every established theory about evolution and survival. Kell's 8 arms moved in precise patterns across his biocomputer interfaces, his amphibious form perfectly adapted for the aquatic research chambers of the Council's Science Division. For 2 centuries, he had studied the evolution patterns of over 3,000 known species. None of them had prepared him for what Earth's archives revealed. The planet itself was an impossibility. Kell's atmospheric analysis programs crashed repeatedly when processing Earth's environmental data. The world experienced temperature variations that ranged from -60 degrees to +60 degrees Celsius. Most species required environmental suits to survive such extremes, yet humans lived in these conditions wearing only simple fabric coverings. "Computer, display Earth's gravitational specifications," Kell commanded. The holographic display materialized above his workstation, and Kell's breathing sacs contracted in shock. Earth's gravity measured 9.8 meters per second squared, nearly 3 times the galactic standard. The implications staggered him. Every human he might encounter was essentially a living weapon, possessing bone density and muscle strength that would crush most galactic citizens through casual contact. But gravity was only the beginning of Earth's hostility. The atmospheric composition contained 21% oxygen, a highly reactive gas that most species considered toxic. Combined with nitrogen and trace amounts of other compounds, Earth's air would corrode the respiratory systems of most council members within minutes. Yet humans had evolved to require this corrosive mixture to survive. Kel dove deeper into Earth's biological archives, and each discovery amplified his growing dread. The planet's wildlife read like a catalog of nightmare creatures. Predators that could run at speeds exceeding 60 kilometers per hour, marine creatures capable of generating enough pressure to crush metal, and microscopic organisms that could kill a human within days. Yet humans hadn't just survived alongside these creatures. They had domesticated many of them. Kel found records of humans living in partnership with descendants of apex predators, creatures they called dogs and cats. The casual way humans coexisted with beings that would terrorize most galactic species suggested a fundamental difference in their approach to danger. The historical archives proved even more unsettling. Kel accessed human military records dating back thousands of years, expecting to find typical territorial disputes over resources. Instead, he discovered a species that had repeatedly brought itself to the edge of extinction through warfare, then rebuilt stronger than before. Their conflicts weren't simple resource wars. Humans fought over ideas, concepts, and principles that most species would simply negotiate through diplomatic channels. They had developed weapons capable of destroying entire planets, then exercised the restraint not to use them. The psychological implications horrified Kel. What kind of species developed the ability to end all life on their world, then chose not to? Computer, analyze human technological development patterns. The analysis revealed another impossibility. Most species developed technology gradually over millions of years, slowly advancing from basic tools to spaceflight. Humans had accomplished the same progression in less than 10,000 years, with most of their advancement occurring in the final few centuries. More disturbing still was how they had achieved this rapid development. Rather than focusing purely on survival technologies, humans had simultaneously developed art, music, literature, and philosophy. They had created beauty while living on a world trying to kill them. Kel's research showed that humans produced their greatest artistic achievements during their most violent historical periods. The warfare data painted a picture that challenged galactic understanding of conflict resolution. Humans didn't simply fight until one side achieved victory. They fought until they forced fundamental changes in their opponent's thinking. Their wars ended not with surrender, but with ideological transformation. Kel pulled up records of humanity's most recent global conflict, a war that had involved nearly every population center on their planet. The casualty numbers exceeded the total population of most galactic civilizations. Yet within decades of this devastating conflict, former enemies had become allies, working together to rebuild their shattered world. Computer, Project Human Combat, capabilities based on available data. The tactical analysis that emerged made Kel's gills flutter with distress. Humans had evolved as persistence hunters, capable of tracking prey across vast distances without tiring. Their endurance exceeded that of most known species by orders of magnitude. Combined with their deathworld strength and atmospheric adaptations, a single human could potentially engage multiple galactic soldiers in combat. But physical capabilities were only part of their martial advantage. Humans demonstrated cognitive flexibility that allowed them to adapt tactics in real time. They could function as individuals or as collective units, switching between strategies based on situational requirements. Most disturbing of all, They showed an ability to remain calm and focused under stress conditions that would paralyze most species. Kell accessed the psychological profiles that human diplomats had provided during initial contact negotiations. The results defied logic. Despite evolving on a world that should have produced paranoid, aggressive survivalists, humans had developed complex emotional capabilities. They formed strong social bonds, demonstrated empathy for other species, and showed remarkable capacity for both cooperation and individual achievement. Yet beneath these civilized traits lurked something that made Kell's research team nervous. Humans possessed what their own psychologists called a fight-or-flight response, an automatic system that could transform peaceful individuals into efficient combatants within seconds. Every human carried the potential for violence, carefully, controlled by social conditioning and personal choice. The cultural archives revealed the most chilling aspect of human development. They had created elaborate systems of ethics and morality specifically to constrain their own capabilities. Their laws weren't just about maintaining order. They were about preventing their species from destroying itself and others through their natural advantages. Kell transmitted his preliminary findings to the Galactic Council with a priority alert. The humans weren't just another species seeking membership in galactic civilization. They were apex predators who had chosen to become gardeners, creatures of immense destructive potential who had decided to build rather than destroy. His final report contained a warning that would reshape galactic politics for generations to come. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't their deathworld adaptations or their advanced technology. It was their restraint. Any species that could survive Earth and choose peace represented either the galaxy's greatest hope or its ultimate threat. Distinction, Kell realized with growing unease, would depend entirely on how the galaxy chose to treat them. War Master Throck dismissed the Council's warnings with contempt as his battle fleet emerged from hyperspace above the human colony world. His massive form dominated the command center of the hegemony dreadnought, his scaled hide bearing the ritual, scars of 100 victories. For 3 centuries, the hegemony had conquered species across half the galaxy through superior firepower and ruthless tactics. These soft, primitive humans would be no different. Deploy ground forces to the primary settlement, Throck commanded, his voice carrying the authority of absolute dominance. Standard subjugation protocol. Kill the fighters, enslave the workers, harvest the resources. His tactical officer, a veteran of dozens of successful invasions, manipulated the holographic displays with practiced efficiency. Sir, intelligence suggests the humans have minimal defensive capabilities. Our shock troops should complete the operation within hours. Below them, the colony world of New Terra sparkled in the light of its yellow sun. Orbital scans revealed a settlement of perhaps 50,000 humans, their cities built with the geometric precision typical of younger species. No orbital defenses, no military installations, no signs of advanced weaponry. It appeared to be exactly what the hegemony expected from a primitive farming world. The first wave of assault pods screamed through the atmosphere, carrying 2,000 of the hegemony's elite shock troops. Each warrior stood 3 meters tall, their exoskeletons capable of deflecting most energy weapons. They had never failed to break enemy resistance within the first hour of engagement, but as the pods touched down in the colony's central plaza, something felt wrong. The streets were empty, but not with the panicked evacuation typical of civilian populations under attack. This emptiness felt deliberate, calculated, like a trap waiting to be sprung. Lieutenant Commander Eve watched the alien landing from her concealed position in the administrative building. Her mixed unit of military personnel and civilian volunteers had been preparing for this moment since the first reports of hegemony expansion reached human space. What the aliens didn't understand was that every human settlement was also a fortress, and every human colonist was also a soldier. All units, remember the plan. Eve spoke into her communicator, her voice calm despite the overwhelming enemy numbers. Let them commit to the urban terrain. Then we begin the education process. The hegemony shock troops advanced through the empty streets with confidence born of easy victories. Their tactical doctrine relied on overwhelming firepower and intimidation, strategies that had broken the will of countless species. They expected desperate resistance from poorly armed civilians hiding in buildings. Instead, they walked into the most sophisticated killing ground any human military planner had ever designed. The first indication something was wrong came when their communications began failing. Not jammed or blocked, but subtly redirected. Orders became confused, unit positions became uncertain, and coordination began breaking down. The humans had somehow turned the hegemony's own technology against them. Then the attacks began, but not in any pattern the aliens recognized. Instead of massed resistance, individual hegemony soldiers simply disappeared. One moment they were advancing with their unit. The next, they were gone, leaving only brief sounds of struggle that their recording equipment somehow failed to capture. War Master Throck monitored the ground operation from orbit, his confidence slowly transforming into confusion. What is the status of the primary assault? Unclear, sir, his tactical officer replied, manipulating displays that showed increasingly chaotic data. Our units report successful advancement, but casualty counts don't match their positions. It's as if the humans are killing our warriors without being detected. On the ground, Eve's teams demonstrated why humans had earned their reputation as persistence hunters. They moved through terrain they knew intimately, using every advantage their deathworld evolution had provided. While the hegemony troops stumbled through unfamiliar urban environments, humans flowed like water around obstacles, striking from impossible angles before vanishing again. The aliens' superior technology meant nothing when they couldn't identify targets. Their massive size became a liability in spaces designed for human proportions. Their reliance on overwhelming force failed against an enemy that refused to mass for convenient destruction. But the true horror for the hegemony forces came when they realized the humans weren't just killing them. They were learning from each encounter, adapting their tactics in real time, and sharing that knowledge instantaneously across all units. Every failed alien attack made the next human response more effective. Sir, the tactical officer's voice carried notes of panic that Throck had never heard from his veterans. We've lost contact with the entire Western assault group. The last transmission suggested they were under attack by their own weapons. Throck's scaled features twisted into a snarl of rage and disbelief. No primitive species had ever demonstrated such tactical sophistication. Deploy the second wave. Double the numbers. Burn the city if necessary. The fresh assault troops landed to find a battlefield that defied comprehension. Their comrades' weapons and equipment lay scattered through the streets, but there were no bodies, no blood, no evidence of what had happened to 2,000 elite warriors. Worse, their own gear began malfunctioning almost immediately, as if the humans had somehow learned to turn hegemony technology against itself. Eve coordinated the defense from positions the aliens couldn't detect, her forces moving through tunnel. Systems the colonists had built for exactly this purpose. The humans fought with weapons they had captured and modified, turning superior alien technology into tools of liberation. Commander, the second wave is beginning to break, reported one of her unit leaders. They're starting to retreat to their landing zones. Negative, Eve replied, checking her tactical displays. Let them retreat, but make sure they take a message with them. We want the fleet to know exactly what happened here. As the surviving hegemony ground forces fled to their extraction points, they carried tales that would haunt their species for generations. They spoke of humans who moved like ghosts through familiar terrain, who turned every piece of captured equipment into a weapon, who fought with the coordinated precision of a hive mind while maintaining individual initiative. But the final lesson came when the hegemony fleet prepared to bombard the colony from orbit. As War Master Throck gave the order to fire, his weapon systems refused to respond. Every piece of captured technology his ground forces had been exposed to contained hidden viruses, programs designed to propagate through connected systems. The humans hadn't just defeated his ground assault, they had captured his entire fleet, through strategic patience and technological superiority, disguised as primitive desperation. From the surface of New Terra, a single human ship emerged from behind the planet's moon. The vessel looked primitive compared to hegemony dreadnoughts, but it now controlled their weapons, their shields, and their life support systems. War Master Throck, Eve's voice filled his command center, calm and professional. This is Lieutenant Commander Eve of the Human Colonial Defense Force. We're transmitting coordinates for prisoner exchange and negotiation. We'd like to discuss terms for your surrender and repatriation. Throck stared at his useless displays, understanding finally why the Galactic Council had tried to warn him. The humans hadn't just won a battle. They had taught the hegemony why predators from deathworlds didn't simply fight wars. They ended them. Intelligence Officer Ray crouched in the ventilation shaft of the hegemony's most secure command facility, listening to alien voices discussing humanity's tactical capabilities. 3 months had passed since the New Terra incident, and the hegemony leadership still hadn't grasped the full scope of what they faced. That was about to change. His mission wasn't assassination or sabotage in any traditional sense. Ray and his small team had come to demonstrate a simple point. If humans could infiltrate the hegemony's core worlds without detection, they could eliminate the alien empire's leadership structure whenever they chose. The demonstration required precision, patience, and the kind of psychological warfare that turned enemy strengths into weaknesses. "Ghost Leader to all units," Ray whispered into his throat mic. "Phase 1 is complete. All major infrastructure nodes are mapped and prepared. Beginning Phase 2. Across the hegemony capital world, 5 other human operatives received the signal. They had spent weeks studying alien behavior patterns, learning the rhythms of daily life in an empire that had never experienced internal threats. The hegemony's security focused outward, designed to repel invasion fleets and suppress subject populations. They had never considered that their enemies might already be inside their most protected spaces. Ray consulted his handheld scanner and smiled. The hegemony's environmental systems weren't just vulnerable to human interference. They were practically designed for it. Alien engineers had prioritized efficiency over security, creating networks that human technical specialists could access and manipulate without triggering standard alerts. The first phase of the operation began at precisely midnight, hegemony capital time. Across the planet's surface, power grids experienced subtle fluctuations, not failures, but carefully calculated disruptions that created patterns of confusion without causing actual damage. Streetlights dimmed and brightened in sequences that spelled out human mathematical concepts. Building climate controls adjusted temperatures by degrees that corresponded to Earth's atmospheric pressure. To most hegemony citizens, these seemed like minor technical glitches. To their intelligence services, the patterns represented something far more disturbing, proof that humans could manipulate their infrastructure at will. "Sir, we're receiving reports from all sectors," an aide reported to Supreme Commander Dex in his underground command bunker. "The humans are somehow accessing our environmental controls, but our security sweeps show no signs of intrusion." Dex studied the tactical displays with growing unease. His species had conquered dozens of worlds through overwhelming military superiority, but they had never encountered an enemy that could strike without being detected. The reports suggested humans could move through hegemony facilities like spirits, leaving no trace except the evidence of their passage. Ray monitored these conversations through communication intercepts his team had established during their infiltration. The hegemony leadership was beginning to understand that their security had been compromised, but they couldn't determine how or by whom. That uncertainty was exactly what human psychological warfare specialists had intended to create. "Ghost 3 to leader," came a whispered transmission. I'm in position at the primary data center, ready to begin the information phase. Proceed, Ray replied, moving deeper into the facility's infrastructure. His mission required him to reach the hegemony's central command chamber, not to harm anyone inside, but to prove that he could reach anyone inside whenever humans chose to do so. Phase 2 began with the hegemony's communication networks experiencing selective failures. Military channels remained functional, but civilian networks began displaying human poetry, mathematical proofs, and philosophical discussions translated into hegemony languages. Citizens across the empire found their personal devices sharing human perspectives on war, peace, and the nature of civilization. The psychological impact exceeded every projection. Hegemony society had never encountered ideas that challenged their fundamental assumptions about conquest and dominance. Human concepts about cooperation, mutual benefit, and protective strength created cognitive dissonance that spread through their population like a virus. Commander Dex, his intelligence chief reported, were detecting increased anxiety levels across all population centers. Citizens are requesting explanations for the human communications, but our psychologists don't know how to respond. Find the humans, Dex snarled, his massive form radiating frustration. Deploy every security team, activate every scanner, tear apart every building if necessary. They have to be somewhere. But human infiltration doctrine had been developed by a species that evolved as persistence hunters. Ray and his team moved through hegemony installations like water flowing around obstacles, always present but never contained. They used maintenance tunnels, service corridors, and utility spaces that alien security forces never monitored because they never imagined anyone could navigate such restricted environments. Ray reached his primary objective just as Phase 3 began. The hegemony's flagship, a massive dreadnought that served as Supreme Commander Dex's mobile headquarters, experienced a complete system lockdown while docked for routine maintenance. Every security protocol activated simultaneously, trapping the vessel's crew inside their own ship, while external displays broadcast a simple message in perfect hegemony script. We could have killed you all. We chose not to. Think about why. The psychological warfare reached its crescendo when Ray appeared in the Supreme Commander's private quarters, not through forced entry or violence, but by walking through security systems that had been programmed to ignore his presence. Dex found him sitting calmly in the commander's personal chair, reading from a human tablet while sipping a beverage he had prepared using the facility's kitchen systems. Supreme Commander Dex, Ray said politely, rising and offering a respectful bow. I apologize for the intrusion, but we needed to have a conversation, and your security forces were making formal appointments difficult to arrange. Dex reached for his personal weapons, only to discover that Ray had carefully dismantled and cleaned them before arranging the pieces in neat displays across the desk. Not destroyed, but rendered temporarily non-functional through methodical care rather than violence. How? Dex asked, his voice carrying tones of defeat that Ray's translator rendered as profound exhaustion. We're very good at going places we're not supposed to be, Ray replied, settling back into the chair with casual comfort. It's a useful skill when you evolve on a planet where everything wants to kill you. You learn to move quietly, think ahead, and find ways around obstacles that seem impossible. Your forces, Dex said, gesturing toward displays that showed continuing communication disruptions across the Empire. How many troops did you deploy for this operation? Ray smiled and held up 6 fingers. Including myself. We're not really invasion specialists, Commander. We're more like consultants. We came to demonstrate possibilities, not to conquer territory. The implications devastated Dex's understanding of military science. 6 individuals had penetrated the hegemony's most secure installations, compromised their entire communication network, and demonstrated that they could eliminate the Empire's leadership structure whenever they chose, all without firing a single shot or causing any permanent damage. What do you want? Dex asked. "We want you to understand that there are alternatives to conquest," Ray replied, producing a datapad containing detailed proposals for diplomatic solutions. "The human government has no interest in destroying the hegemony. We'd prefer to help you find ways to achieve your goals without enslaving other species. And if we refuse?" Ray stood and moved toward the door, pausing to activate systems that restored the Supreme Commander's weapons and security protocols. "Then we'll continue to demonstrate that your empire exists only because we allow it to exist. That tends to make people nervous, and nervous people make poor decisions." As Ray departed through security systems that had been reprogrammed to facilitate his exit, he left behind a hegemony leadership that finally understood what they faced. Humans didn't need to conquer the galaxy through superior firepower. They had already conquered it through superior thinking, leaving their enemies with a simple choice: cooperation or the constant knowledge that resistance was futile. The Ghost Protocol had achieved its objective without a single casualty, proving that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their strength or their technology, it was their imagination. Ambassador Tom walked into the Galactic Council chambers, carrying nothing more than a simple briefcase and the weight of representing an entire species. 1 year had passed since humanity's first contact with galactic civilization, and the assembled representatives from 300 worlds watched him with mixtures of curiosity, respect, and carefully controlled fear. The circular chamber had been designed to emphasize equality among species, with each delegation occupying identical seating, areas around a central speaking platform. But today, the usual diplomatic chatter had fallen silent, as representatives waited to hear how humanity intended to use the power they had demonstrated across the galaxy. Tom stepped onto the speaking platform and looked around the chamber with calm confidence. His appearance was deliberately unremarkable, chosen to remind the assembled aliens that humans didn't need impressive physical traits or advanced technology to project authority. They had something far more potent: the certainty that came from knowing their principles and living by them. "Honored delegates," Tom began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems, "I stand before you today not as a conqueror seeking tribute, nor as a supplicant requesting acceptance. I represent a species that has chosen to extend our most fundamental principle beyond the boundaries of our home world." Murmurs rippled through the assembly as translators converted his words into hundreds of languages. The Threnody delegation chimed with harmonic uncertainty. The surviving hegemony representatives remained silent, their recent experiences having taught them the wisdom of listening when humans spoke. "For those who have studied our history, you know that humanity developed on what you classify as a death world. Everything on Earth tried to kill us, from the climate to the wildlife to microscopic organisms too small to see. We survived by developing a simple philosophy: protect those who cannot protect themselves." Tom paused, allowing his words to resonate through the chamber. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably, recognizing the implications of human protective instincts applied on a galactic scale. This principle began with our families, expanded to our tribes, grew to encompass our nations, and eventually covered our entire species. Today, I'm here to announce that humanity is extending that protection to include every peaceful species in this galaxy. The chamber erupted in discussions as delegates tried to process what they had just heard. Some species saw opportunity in human protection. Others recognized a threat to their traditional power structures. All understood that the balance of galactic politics had just shifted fundamentally. Supreme Commander Dex of the Hegemony delegation rose slowly, his massive form commanding attention. His recent experiences with human infiltration specialists had taught him to speak carefully when addressing humanity's representatives. "Ambassador Tom," Dex said, his translator rendering his words with formal precision. "The hegemony has learned to respect human capabilities, but protection often becomes domination. How do we know you won't become the next galactic empire? Tom smiled, and those who had studied human expressions recognized it as genuinely friendly rather than predatory. An excellent question, Commander Dex. The answer lies in understanding why humans fight. He activated a holographic display that showed images from Earth's history, carefully selected to illustrate humanity's evolution from tribal warfare to global cooperation. We learned early that conquest requires constant violence to maintain control. Protection, however, creates stability that benefits everyone involved. The display shifted to show current human activities across known space, instead of military, bases and occupation forces. The images revealed research stations, medical facilities, and communication networks designed to serve multiple species rather than human interests alone. Human military forces operate under rules of engagement that are more restrictive than most species' peacekeeping protocols, Tom continued. We don't fight to conquer territory or resources. We fight to ensure that strength cannot be used to prey upon weakness. Ambassador Valen of the Threnody, whose first contact report had introduced humanity to the galactic community, rose to address the chamber. The humans speak of protection, but their capabilities suggest they could conquer any of us whenever they chose. How do we reconcile such power with claims of peaceful intent? By understanding that human aggression is actually a form of justice, Tom replied. We've learned that the best way to prevent large conflicts is to stop small injustices before they grow. When the strong prey upon the weak, we intervene not as conquerors, but as peacekeepers. To illustrate his point, Tom displayed tactical reports from recent human operations. Pirates who had terrorized shipping lanes for decades had been eliminated by human naval patrols. Slave trading operations that had victimized dozens of species had been dismantled by human special forces. Criminal organizations that had operated with impunity under previous galactic power structures had simply vanished when humans arrived. But we claim no territory from these operations, Tom emphasized. We demand no tribute, establish no colonies, and impose no governments. We simply ensure that those who would harm others understand that such behavior will not be tolerated. Delegate from the Spiral Federation, a collection of peaceful species that had long suffered from predatory neighbors, stood to address the chamber. What guarantee do we have that human protection will continue? What prevents you from abandoning us when your interests change? Tom's expression grew serious as he considered the question. There are no guarantees in the universe except the ones we make for ourselves. But I can tell you this. Human protective instincts aren't based on political calculations or temporary interests. They're based on principles that our species has carried since we first learned to work together for survival. He gestured toward the chamber's observation galleries, where representatives from dozens of species watched the proceedings with intense interest. Every species in this galaxy developed differently, faced unique challenges, and found their own solutions to survival. But there's one thing that unites us all. We're here. We survived long enough to reach the stars, to build civilizations, to create art and music and philosophy. The holographic display shifted to show images of galactic civilizations at their peak. The magnificent achievements that countless species had built through millennia of effort. Then the display darkened, showing the threats that lurked at the galaxy's edges. Machine collectives that consumed entire worlds, ancient predators that had once devoured civilizations, and the vast empty spaces where thriving systems had simply vanished. The galaxy is full of things that want to destroy what we've built, Tom continued, his voice carrying the weight of hard-earned wisdom. Some are natural disasters, some are ancient threats awakening from long sleep, and some are new dangers that emerge as civilizations rise and fall. Humanity has taken on the responsibility of standing watch against these threats. A new voice rose from the assembly as Dr. Kell, the researcher whose xenobiology reports had first analyzed human capabilities, addressed the chamber. Ambassador Tom, your species' commitment to protection is admirable, But your methods concern many of us. How do you justify the psychological warfare used against the hegemony? Tom nodded, acknowledging the validity of the concern. Dr. Kell, psychological warfare is indeed one of humanity's most effective tools, but we use it to minimize casualties rather than maximize them. When we demonstrated our infiltration capabilities to the hegemony, we could have eliminated their leadership structure permanently. Instead, we chose to show them that resistance was futile while giving them the opportunity to choose cooperation. The chamber fell silent as delegates considered the implications. Humanity possessed the capability to end conflicts through overwhelming force, but they consistently chose methods that preserved life while achieving strategic objectives. The result, Tom continued, is that former enemies become allies rather than occupied territories. The hegemony's military forces now serve as peacekeepers in their own systems, working alongside human units to protect trade routes and civilian populations. We haven't conquered them. We've convinced them that cooperation serves their interests better than conquest. Commander Dex stood again, his posture reflecting a mixture of resignation and grudging respect. The humans speak truth. Our forces have seen more productive deployment in the past year than in the previous decade of conquest. Protecting trade routes and civilian populations has proven more rewarding than enslaving them. Tom smiled at the hegemony commander's admission. Commander Dex demonstrates an important principle. When you stop spending resources on oppression, you have more resources available for construction and growth. The hegemony's economy has improved significantly since they shifted from conquest to protection. The discussion continued for hours as delegates raised concerns about human methods, motivations, and long-term plans. Tom answered each question with patience and honesty, never claiming that humanity was perfect, but demonstrating that they had learned from their mistakes and developed systems to prevent the abuse of power. As the formal session concluded, Tom delivered humanity's final message to the galactic community. We didn't come to the stars to build an empire or accumulate wealth. We came because the same instincts that drove us to explore our homeworld eventually drove us to explore the galaxy. And just as we learned to protect our families and communities on Earth, we've learned to protect our galactic neighbors among the stars. The holographic display shifted one final time, showing real-time feeds from human naval patrols across known space. Ships bearing Earth's insignia moved through systems belonging to dozens of different species, not as occupation, forces, but as guardians watching for threats that no single world could face alone. The ancient predators that once consumed entire civilizations are awakening in the deep void, Tom said, his voice carrying quiet determination. Machine collectives probe our borders, testing our defenses. Unknown threats emerge from unexplored regions of space. But every peaceful species in this galaxy can sleep safely knowing that humanity is watching. We make no claims to territory beyond our own systems. We demand no tribute beyond the cooperation necessary to maintain galactic security. We establish no government beyond the coordination required to respond to threats. But we promise this: as long as humanity exists, the strong will not be permitted to prey upon the weak. Tom closed his briefcase and prepared to leave the platform, but paused to deliver humanity's final commitment to the galactic community. The universe is vast, dark, and full of dangers that individual worlds cannot face alone, but it's also full of wonders that cooperative civilizations can discover together. Humanity has chosen to ensure that cooperation remains possible. We didn't come to rule the galaxy, Tom concluded, echoing words that would be remembered throughout galactic history. We came to make sure no one else does either. As Tom left the chamber, delegates from 300 worlds sat in contemplative silence, understanding that the galaxy had fundamentally changed. Humanity had claimed no territory, but they had claimed something far more significant: responsibility for protecting everything that peaceful civilizations had built among the stars. In the months that followed, reports would reach the council chambers of threats neutralized before they could spread, of rescue operations launched across impossible distances, and of human forces appearing wherever peaceful species faced dangers they couldn't handle alone. The galaxy's most fearsome warrior species had become its most trusted guardians, watching eternally from the darkness between stars to ensure that the light of civilization would continue to shine.